blessing of life, thankful for the love that you show to us in so many ways, and help us to reflect that towards each other and to all souls. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So I've got a couple things that I'll use just as conversation starters to make us think about some of the things that we just talked about during the course of our lesson. So practical and meaningful ways to serve others. So here's some principles, and we'll stop after each one, and then we have some practical thing. I've got a list of like 30 or 40 different things. So when we think about serving others, you know, every person that we see is another human being, another soul, another person, not a project. So we don't just do good just to say we've done good. We do good because we legitimately want to help somebody. And that's sometimes tough to do. I've caught myself before. Years ago, Evelyn said, do you know so-and-so? I said, yes. Well, so-and-so needs such and such. And I'm thinking, well, this is the day I plan to do stuff for me. And I was a little bit frustrated. And she said, we've got something we don't need. This person needs it. We need to give it to them. And I thought, oh, you're right. That's exactly what John says. Whoever has this world's goods and closes his heart up and doesn't see the needs and is willing to meet that person's needs, something's wrong. And so I was very apologetic about it afterwards. So I'm not saying everybody is, but occasionally we are very protective of our time and our stuff and our resources and our efforts, whatever, and we'd rather use those things for things that are important to us. And stepping outside of ourselves is a difficult challenge sometimes. So tell me what feedback you think about that.
I agree.
Well, good. No more comments. She agrees. I'm not trying to be cute or snarky, but that's just a tough thing to do sometimes. We get home and we retreat to our favorite spot and are doing our favorite things. And sometimes the necessity of the needs of others that are greater than ours, I'm going to use the word demands, but requires might be better, the expectation that we're going to do something to help somebody else.
I have had issues, or maybe perhaps a problem, when it comes to rendering to someone else's need.
Yeah.
And sometimes in my journey with that, I try to qualify whether I want to do good for that person based on what I see from the outside of the appearance. If I see somebody who's able-bodied like me, standing on the street and asking for money or whatever the case may be, I say, well, dog, he's able enough to work. Why is he out here begging? Instead of just going up to the person, if you got the time to find out what's going on.
Yeah.
And perhaps it'll satisfy the fact that you know you really answer the need to that person by going to them and figuring out what's going on. Because a lot of times people may look like they're capable of taking care of themselves, but then they may have a situation that has occurred that may fall on hard time.
Yeah.
And we need to be vigilant about that.
And I understand there are a lot of people take advantage of other people's generosity.
Yes.
And, you know, my initial, response in dealing with that is I give people the benefit of the doubt until they prove me wrong, or till I'm proven wrong. I saw something 2 weeks ago. Do you have any idea how many people in the greater Atlanta area are living, not temporarily staying, but living in hotel rooms because they can't afford an apartment? Thousands. Thousands of people are living. So when you drive down the road, you don't see this all the time, but there are different levels and qualities of hotels and motels, but a lot of them are day, week, month rental. Well, you're not going to see that on higher scale Marriotts or Hiltons, and I'm not belittling them. But there are some people who can't afford what it takes to get into an apartment, and the only thing they can afford, because they don't have to have a huge down payment, is to pay daily to live in some of the lower end from the standpoint of quality and care motels and hotels. And there are just a lot of people that are in that. But there are thousands of people and hundreds of school kids that are in that situation. And some of them are multiple families in those situations. So the first thing is, seeing people for what they are, not as projects. There are a lot of people that could use help. And so what we can do to help them is in part dependent upon us. All right, next one, draw near. Get close to people. And so you can do things from a distance, and you can do things up front and in person. And so I've mentioned this before, and it's not going to mention any names, but there are some family members that we have that we know that live in Indiana that are always in need. And it's just a very awkward situation. There are 4 adults and 5 kids that just recently moved into a trailer because they couldn't afford anything else, and they always need something. And if I have the money to help them, I can't say no, because it breaks my heart. So this is my brother who died a few years ago of cancer. It's his extended family. And they're just, the word dysfunctional doesn't begin to touch where they are. And that's no disrespect to them whatsoever. So they always are texting me or Evelyn saying, we don't have a place to live. We've been, asked to leave because they haven't been paying their bills on time. I know what that's about. And, we're going to move here. Can you help us with some food? And so, again, they live at a distance, so Evelyn's always placing Walmart orders to help them. I can't say no when I have $200 to help somebody with food, and they need it, and I don't have to have it in the moment. So if you ever get destitute, just reach out to me. If I have the money, I'll help you. Now, I'm not saying that to brag. I'm just saying I'm a softie when it comes to trying to help people. And it doesn't just have to be people I know. But part of it is being as close to them as possible, drawing near to them. Helping from a distance is easy to do because you don't have to be there. But as much as we possibly can, sometimes we have to be involved in lives of others, close to us, friends, whatever connection, that it's not as clean and pretty as you want it to be. I'm not talking about cleanliness issues, but I'm just talking about the mess that some people have gotten themselves into. And sometimes it requires an investment of time and effort and so forth. Any thoughts about this? Anybody else have family like this? It's a constant thing. So, again, carrying a load, doing something that's going to pay real attention to them. So time, attention, resources, I use effort, and advocating for them and trying to help them as much as we can. Evelyn and I have both taken times to call every kind of social service thing we can find in the greater area where they are, to find if there can be something done, find out if there's something can be done to help them on a longer term rather than just an immediate or an interim basis. And it's an investment, and it's sometimes frustrating because you don't see that it sticks, that the same problems keep reoccurring, but that happens. Jesus said something that when I think of these things, he said, "The poor you always have with you." He didn't say how they got there. He didn't say whether it was loss of job, somebody died, had a mental breakdown. Something physically happened to them, they're going through some kind of emotional difficulties, or whatever it might be, but there are always going to be people that are in need. And so to some extent, we should try and be willing to help them without being prejudging. And that's a tough thing to do sometimes. We, as much as we possibly can, need to be thinking about these things. Any insight, any input? All right, we'll go through another one or two of these, and then we'll go into some practical ways. So, when you're helping another human being survive for another day, that contributes in part to their well-being, their health, their wealth, and that sort of thing, and just taking care of themselves. And that's an important thing to do. I know the mindset of many people is, our job is to save souls, not to feed souls. Well, I can't read the New Testament except that I see Jesus feeding multitudes. Not one or two at a time. He did it miraculously, obviously, and I can't do that. And whatever Jesus could do miraculously, I have the right to do non-miraculously as much as I possibly can to help others. So I understand, that our primary goal is to touch people's hearts, spiritually speaking, and to help them find out who Jesus is and what Jesus did to cleanse them of their sins. But sometimes you have to do other things to have the right to be able to do that. And I'm not saying you're buying their time or you're buying the willingness to do so. But sometimes, you've heard this 1,000 times, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And sometimes showing how much you care catches their attention. You're really interested in me. You're really wanting to help something. And some people may go from place to place and do nothing but just seek help and not try to get connected to anybody. I understand that. And at some point you might say, well, I'm not going to help you anymore. After Jesus fed multitudes on one occasion and he crossed the Sea of Galilee, people came looking for him. And he said very expressly, you're looking for me because you want food. And they traveled all that distance to get there. And he wasn't trying to be mean, but he's making a point. They were trying to take advantage of him physically, just like some people try to take advantage of the Lord by means of expecting God's grace to cover their sins. That's just not right. And so, we need to do what we can to get close to people. So here's some practical things to think about. All right. So being there in the context of being with somebody, listening first. Everybody's got a story about why they are where they are and their need of help. And it's easy to be dismissive of them. But some of them are legitimate. Some of them are genuine. Some of them are really, in hard times. And so sometime last year or so, my son lives in the East Atlanta Village area. And I was out doing my walking or whatever, and I walked all around and saw a lady sitting on a bench, and she just looked very forlorn. I said, are you okay? She goes, no, I'm not. And so I got her name, and she made reference to a counselor in the area that she worked with. And I reached out to the guy, and I said, I talked to this lady. He goes, oh yeah, she's one of the people in my care. And he said, makes no difference how much you help her, she will always need more help. And he said, it's not that she's trying to cheat anybody or take advantage of anybody. She is just unable mentally, physically to fend for herself at all. He said, she will always be in that kind of state. And I said, well, I tried to encourage her and help her, and she, needed some help and whatever. And I just wanted to know more. So I could have just, given her some money and walked away. But I took the time, and she gave me her name and told me the person that she worked with as part of this I think it's in-town ministries is what they call it. And this guy was a psychologist that worked with this group to help people that needed help psychologically, which is so much spiritually and so forth. And I didn't know. And so I learned a lesson. This is not just a person who's looking for a handout all the time. There were some serious problems that were there. And so, trying to be present, to help people with humility and not to help in a way that shows you are better than or come across as if you're better than they are and as if they are less than you are. That just, that can be difficult to do. We don't want to come across with a savior, approach. We don't want to come across as if we are the Christ. We aren't. We should be willing to help and have some degree of humility to do so. Let me stop and pause here for a second. Has anybody ever been in a situation that you were so destitute that you wish somebody would reach out and help you? Yes? No? Maybe?
I think this world does a very,
Say that again?
the world does a very bad job of, for someone that's done some things that aren't great, whether they've been arrested or drugs or whatever it may be, it's very hard for them to get back on their feet.
Yeah.
Because a company's not gonna hire you if you've had a felony. A lot of companies won't hire you if you've been arrested.
Yep.
A lot of companies won't hire you if you've had a DUI. And so I've known people that have just struggled their whole life because unless you just know somebody that's gonna hire you, they struggle to get work their whole life.
Yeah.
And before long, they're 40, 50 years old, and Nobody wants to hire somebody that age. So it's a struggle their whole life. And I've got family members that way, I've known friends that way, and it's just very hard, and they struggle forever.
Yeah.
Because of decisions they made, even though their slate's wiped clean, you know, people won't hire. I had somebody, this was several years ago, that wanted me to hire their son. He was probably mid-20s, late 20s, but had had a DUI. And when HR found that out, they wouldn't even send me his resume to look at.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was just their policy, you know? And it's just hard for people, you know? And you made a comment earlier about somebody always needing that help. Sometimes that backstory is, you know, that's part of it, you know, they can't get the help.
Yep.
You know? And you have to be lucky sometimes to get out of that hole once you've dug yourself into that.
Yeah. I think I've mentioned this before. We had a friend, Evelyn had a friend reach out to her who had a relative that was in one of the county jails near where we were in Dahlonega, and said, you know, can we reach out and help him in some way? And we did. We got in touch with him and stayed in touch with him for several years. Last year, I guess it was year before last now, in the summer, we actually got him into a rehab. We had members of the church that ran a rehab facility in Decatur, Alabama, and got him accepted there, and then the state refused to let him go out of state for treatment. They said, no, he has to stay here. I said, well, we've raised the money, we've already got him a place, it's a year-long treatment center, it's just not here. They said, no, it has to be here. Well, that just threw a wrench in everything we tried to do. And I'm not saying, not placing blame anywhere, it's just that sometimes things hang over you forever and you can't get out from under them. If you have the slightest violation of any kind, not paying a bill or DUIs, or you've gotten in trouble for doing something else. This guy was a minor drug user, and I'm not trying to diminish it, but he wasn't a big dealer or anything like that, and he got caught with stuff he shouldn't have. And that record followed him forever. And it was like everywhere he ended up, you know, getting picked up, he got stopped once because a tail light wasn't working, and they ran records and found out that he had a drug offense in the past. And he says, I'm in the rehab program now. And they said, well, our records don't show that. And I know I literally drove to a different county when he was in jail and he was released without any notice. He says, they released me, I have nowhere to go, you know. So he came and stayed with us for a few days. We checked with all the kids that's living with us and their folks, said this guy's he's got some problems, but he's not a violent man. We've been working with him for a long time. But it was like stuff, once it got on the record, it just didn't go away. And this is years old. So he got into drug use when he was 15. He's now 33. For half his life, that's what defined him. And so finally he was able, through the rehab program that he had, to get a job and to earn enough money to fend for himself. But it took half his life to get there. And it's still nowhere near what it needs to be. And I'm not trying to excuse him. I'm simply saying sometimes people, I had a young man ask me once, he said, Mr. Apple, he says, I want to live better than I am. What do I have to do? And I simply told him, I said, you need to make the right decisions every day. And so one of his problems, same kind of thing, he was hanging out with some kids that weren't the best to hang out with. And I said, you are coming under the influence of people getting you to do stuff that you don't want to do, and you don't have the resolve in mind to say no. And every time you say yes, you're going to be trapped another day. And I wasn't trying to be mean to him. I was just trying to be very blunt, very bold. His dad had left his mom, had taken up with a younger woman. It was just a very hard situation. And this young man was lost and made a mistake and was wanting to learn how to get out from under that. So my point is, you know, to find out these things, you might think, I can't handle all these hard luck stories or these heartbreaking stories. That's real life that some people face every day. You know, I have a place to go home to. I have a dog that loves me. Oh yeah, I have a wife that loves me. You know, and all those things are important to me, but not everybody has that kind of refuge to go to. So, Jorge, you were going to say something, sir.
Yeah, I was going to say that I found myself in that situation a while back, and you know, by God's grace, came a long way. but it gives me, when I hear you talking about that young fella, you know, it wouldn't be a problem for me to be compassionate because I was him, right? I've never struggled with my criminal record for some reason. I've always, I guess because I've been always so upfront and open, where by the time somebody wants to say something, you know, I've been more transparent with my background than what they can find, you know. But yes, it does help you to see people in a more three-dimensional way,
Yeah.
which is what the Lord wants us to do. He sees us in probably a fourth-dimensional way because He knows our heart. But since we cannot get there, we got to make sure that people are not just one-dimensional. You know, or they use drugs, therefore they're drug addicts.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, in a sense, yeah, when you are addicted to drugs, then you're a drug addict. But there's also a complexity within you that we have to be open to explore it if we want to help.
Right. Some of the problems that people face are self-inflicted. Some of the problems that people face come from outside stuff that happened to them that they can't get over. And so the whole issue of, trafficking for sexual purposes or others, that still goes on all around the world. Goes on in Atlanta. And that's stuff that, those are very deep wounds that people face, and it questions people it causes people to question their worth, and it prompts people to have, thoughts about self-harm, and all that stuff we need to take seriously. You might say, oh, people just trying to get attention, People that I've talked to that have ever even had anything remotely connected to that, they weren't doing anything to seek attention. They were hurting. And you're glad that they speak up. And so finding out more about those things are important. And the other thing is, if there's something's beyond your ability, don't hesitate to encourage somebody to seek help. There are lots of things that people can do to seek help. There are lots of toll-free numbers. Serving the sick and the weary, some of these things are temporary, but some of these things, can be ongoing. Some people have perpetual illness. I just mentioned the young girl that died last week that was 9, that was battling cancer for 6.5 years of her life. She was a little over past 2 when it came up. And that had nothing to do with her. It just circumstances of genetics, what happened to her body. But thankfully she was in an incredibly strong family that was able to help her, but not everybody's there. Another thing is when people need help, we still have to respect the dignity of the people that we're helping. If you're helping somebody and you've got the attitude in the back of your mind all the time, well, this is all your fault. Some of that may be true, some of it may not be. But if they're willing to accept help, treat them like they're another human being worth as much as you are. They may not have the money you have. They may not have the status you have. They may not have a home. They may not have a lot of things, but treating people with dignity is important. Seeing other souls as souls equal in value to you. And so Jesus never belittled or diminished the value of another human being just because they were in a position where they needed help. Right?
A lot of people that are incarcerated right now need help more than they need to be punished.
Well, that's a good point.
Because once they get a record, every police officer knows, and they'll give them a ticket for spitting on the sidewalk, for burned out tail light, for a cracked windshield,
Yeah.
or anything else you can think of, just because they got caught when they was 15 years old with some marijuana. They weren't distributing it, they just had some. And they took the blame for everybody else was in the car with them. And they just don't get a fair break. That's what I'm saying is, our judicial system is cracked. it needs to be fixed, and it needs to be on the help side rather than sticking somebody in prison with people that are 10 times worse than they are, teaching them things, and their influence flows over to that person.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't have no choice. That's just, that's my idea of the thing.
And the penal system says that they're rehabilitating these individuals. They are not.
Sometimes it's just
not
punishing.
that. It's, it's punishment.
So my dad was in the military for 32 years, and he didn't need to work when he retired because Uncle Sam was taking good care of him. But he went to work at a local correctional facility where we were in upstate New York at the time. And he quit after 2 months. He said, some of the people who work there are worse than the people who are in there. And what happened was he was working, so my dad did food service in the military many, many years ago, and then he was in aircraft maintenance latter part. So they needed somebody as an administrator to help the food service inside this correctional facility. So he wasn't a cook or a chef, he just kind of administrated stuff and took care of the orders and that kind of thing. And he was around the loading dock once, and he saw all the food that come in, and people who worked there were taking the food that was provided for the inmates, loading up the back of their cars and taking it home. And he went and talked to the warden. He said, you got people here that are stealing food that's for these inmates, and you're wondering why we're having problems. Well, that didn't go over too well. And so and that's why he said what he said. He just said, there are people who work here should be inside rather than taking care of others. Now, I'm not saying taking food is on the level of, threatening to injure somebody or guilty of harsher crimes, but yeah, we need to be realizing when we talk to others.
I've had this personally happen to me. I ain't gonna call no names, but I had a police officer try to sell me marijuana one time.
Really?
Really?
He wasn't in uniform, was he?
Yes, it was.
Okay, I
Yes,
haven't.
it was. But I won't call any names, but I'm just saying that sometimes these cops gotta get out there, and I have all respect for, I do. I don't know what we do without our first responders. But there are some of them that give a lot of them a bad name. And they shouldn't give somebody a ticket or arrest somebody for something that they are doing themselves.
Yeah,
But it happens all the time.
yeah. So, and this is not television shows, this is real life.
No, this is real stuff.
Yeah. So
This is real stuff.
I can't remember if I said this a couple of months ago. My son was traveling. He lives in the greater Los Angeles area. And he got pulled over. And he was just stunned when he saw like 12 police cars, that were there, and helicopters overhead. And they had him get down on his knees and put his hands behind his head and whatever, and whatever. And it was 15 or 20 minutes before somebody answered the question. He said, what's going on? What have I done? And somebody said, is this your car? He goes, yes, it's my car. He says, well, the license plate on the back isn't your license plate. So in the state of California, you have a license plate on the front and the back, and they're supposed to match. Well, somebody had stolen his legitimate license plate and put a stolen car's license plate on the back, and that's what they saw was the tag. So that got straightened out, and he went and got the replacement. Well, on another trip, he got pulled over because somebody saw the license plate that was the correct one. Said, were you ever pulled over for a stolen car? He goes, yes. He says, well, I see here that you didn't steal the car. He said, yeah, so why am I getting pulled over? And so the point was, he was in another state, and somebody saw that, and so it was still there. So, anything if you sneeze, somebody somewhere's going to know about it, and that's an overstatement. My point is we need to treat people with respect. Again, give them the benefit of the doubt, not being gullible, but trying to do whatever we can. Big thing in this context is protecting the dignity of other people as much as we possibly can. So these are just general things that we need to keep in mind. So when you help people, act like you care when you're helping them. So the concept of hospitality is not being a gracious host. It's not how you dress and the fancy food and the dishes and the setting and the ambiance and all that kind of stuff. It's just being caring and not just acting like you care, but actually reflecting the care for other people, treating them like human beings. Serve by encouragement, strengthening, serve with advocacy and justice. There are a lot of people who've been hurt wrongly, and that it's a struggle for them to get out from under, impressions that people have about them as a class or as a person or as a, something that they've done in the past, and it's hard to get out from under that. So I'm not going to call attention to lots of different things, but there are multiple groups around the country that work to help people get exonerated for stuff they were accused of doing that they never did. You might say, well, there's gazillions of people, overstatement, that are arrested on a daily basis. That's true. Some of them deserve to be arrested. That's true. But some of them aren't, and it's hard to clear their names. I saw something the other day. A young man, he's probably in his 30s, his dad was executed 70 years ago, and 70 years later they found out all the evidence that was provided was all tainted. And so he was granted a guilty, verdict, and the man had been executed so many years ago. You might think, well, that's 1 in a million. No, it happens too much. And so, being patient and being kind and not being judgmental till you know. And so, sometimes people need somebody to come to their defense, not only to help them, but to come to their defense. And so ourselves and others that we knew that were part of the small congregation in Dahlonega would literally go with the young man that I spoke about that had so many issues and show up with them at court hearings and vouch for them and say, we're going to help them, we're going to take care of them, we're going to see that they got in this rehab program. We had members of the church give money to help this young man get into this rehab and so forth. So it wasn't just giving the dollars and cents, but it was being there. After he was there for 6 months and they had something to kind of celebrate that half-year thing, several of us traveled there just to encourage him, to be with him. Being there, somebody, means a lot. And this is a different subject. Sometimes being with somebody that's going through trials in their immediate family, in hospital or hospice care or something like that, sometimes just sitting with somebody and being there to do whatever it needs to be doing. Needs to be done, washing their dishes and, running errands or, any kind of household chore or anything else that they'd rather not be doing because they're paying attention to somebody else. That's, we can do that. That's something that's totally within our ability to do. All right, serving through reconciliation and mercy. And that is living in such a way that we're trying to get these people to see that we're concerned about them in this immediate moment physically, or mentally, whatever it might be, but that on a larger scale, we want to help them spiritually speaking. And there's nothing wrong with sharing that with people, letting people know you're here now to get food, and we're glad to give you the food, but we'd like to teach you about Jesus being the bread of life, and being upfront about that. People respect that. Serving with prayer and spiritual care, sometimes in the context of our prayers at night, Evelyn has to remind me of somebody, or I have to remind her of somebody that we're supposed to keep in prayer all the time, and the list goes up and down. But there are a lot of people that we need to, at very least, pray for on a regular basis. And then, as much as we possibly can, act on, literally, physically, monetarily, if necessary, to help other souls. Jesus never stopped being Jesus. If you look at everything that's recorded of the life of Jesus in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, or that are alluded to after the Gospels and Acts or in the epistles, it is estimated that you cannot find more than 30 to 33 or so specific days of the life of Jesus that could be chronicled. The point is, the scriptures talk about Jesus' ministry lasting for 3 to 3.5 years. But you can't identify more than a month's worth of days in that time. Well, what was he doing the rest of the time? Same stuff he did every day that we see. We just don't see it every day. And so when Jesus sent the apostles out on the limited commission, prepared them for it, Matthew 9, sent them out, Matthew chapter 10, when they were on their way, Jesus went back to doing what he was doing apart from the apostles in Matthew 11, verses 1 and following. But it doesn't tell me all the things he did. It doesn't tell me all the people he met. It doesn't tell me all the places he went. The point was his ministry wasn't, I'm just here and to do this to get you ready, and the rest of the time I'm going to take off. And so it was, even though only 30 plus days can be individually, identified, he did that all the time, every day. And in some passages will tell us he was so swamped with people that, people couldn't get into the house where he was preaching, and so they left the tiles off the roof to let the man die down. Or he went to get away for a break, and people recognized him, and everybody came to him wanting to help something. He was swarmed nonstop. So imagine if you lived 2,000 years ago, and you were anywhere near what Jesus was doing and where he was, and you heard about these things. Your curiosity might make you just go and find out just because you're curious what's going on. And then if you saw him heal people, you saw people that you knew personally or that others knew personally that were healed in some way, that would catch your attention. I want to be closer to who this person is. I want to find out more about them. And so that was nonstop all the time. And so we're not going to be able to do things to the extent that Jesus did, but we need to be prepared to do that stuff as much as possible. All right. We've got about 5 minutes left, but we started on time, believe it or not. So we're going to end a little bit early. Anything else that people want to offer?
I was thinking about the comments that you were making about how Jesus resonated with people.
Yes, sir.
And I think that we should take on that same perspective as trying to be just like Jesus.
Yeah.
So that when people see us, it's a resonation or a decorum about us that we draw people to us because we are supposed to be the light.
Right.
And so that people can understand that they want to understand why you the way you are. And it prompts enough curiosity that they want to get to know you as well as you want to get to know them so that you can impart the word of God to them as well.
All right. And just a reminder, and I know we know this, but just bring it up, follow up what you said. Sometimes Jesus got in trouble because he associated with some people that people thought, he can't really be a Messiah. He can't really be a prophet. If he was, he wouldn't be associating with the tax collectors and, all these other people, the heathen and whatever. But he associated with people because, one, he cared. He wasn't, it wasn't like he took a day off and said, I'm going to go hang out, with people that aren't good people, just to spend some free time. No, he was there to associate with them, to encourage and to help them. And people listened to him.
And I think that we all should be able to lay the groundwork because even when Paul said that he watered it and somebody else came on and planted it, and
That's
then
right.
God would give the increase.
That's
So
right.
even if we speak to people initially, somebody else may later on come behind us and reinforce what we've already said. And then God would be able at some point in their life prick their heart and they may obey.
So this is, and I don't want to go on and on about this, but Ray and I have talked about it. Think about things that we can do as a congregation that we can do, not to quote unquote create a name for ourselves in the community, but that can serve the community, that would draw attention to who we are and what we're trying to do beyond just, providing food or providing, something else that somebody needs to meet a physical need. But to let people say, those people there care. And that's the sort of thing we ought to be thinking about individually, but also collectively as much as we possibly can. Mac, you want to lead us in the closing prayer, sir?
Father, we thank you for this privilege and opportunity that we have had on the first day of the week as we come together to sing songs, give of our means, and partake of the Lord's Supper, and honor God in the